Welcome to Doctors at Work. My name's Matt Daniel, and this podcast is part of my mission to help other doctors create successful and meaningful careers. And today's topic is change. I don't know about you, but there's lots of things that I want to change in my life, and change is difficult. I know for many people it might be life balance, it might be the work that they do and exercise, and we often talk about change, but actually delivering it can be a real struggle. In this episode, Michael Hirsch and myself discuss why change is so tricky, what holds us back, and how the beliefs that we have get in the way. He tells me that change most certainly is possible, and it's necessary to identify what you want to change and also why. Welcome, Michael. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here with you. I'm Dr. Michael Hirsch. I am a gastroenterologist, and I live in Chicago. And I am a mid-career physician, so I'm about 15 years out of training. And I think I love what I do. It has really been such a fulfilling journey, just kind of getting to this point in my life. But probably a couple of years ago is when I found that there was some monotony, some kind of wondering what's next in my life, feeling kind of stuck. And so at that point in time is when I found physician coaching, and kind of my entire trajectory changed. And I won't go too much into the details. I'll let you, ask me whatever you want. But, from the outside, my life today looks very similar than it did before. So I'm married and I have 2 kids, and I'm in the same exact job that I was always in, and I'm still working clinically full time. My life is so much busier, but it is simultaneously so much more fulfilling. And so that's when I decided to become a physician coach myself. And so that's a little bit of like a kind of a small taste, a little tidbit.
The topic for us today is change, and I know that I'm sure many people approach you for coaching and want to talk about change. And certainly, if I think of my life, there are a couple of things that I want to change, and I've been talking about it for quite a while to my own coach about change, and it's difficult. So, why is change so difficult?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves. I know for me, I just had this belief that I couldn't change, that I was who I was, and that was all I was ever going to be. And I actually, if we're being honest, I felt the same way about everybody else. I just assumed that nobody else could change either. And that kind of a fixed mindset without a little bit of self-inquiry, without really trying to dig into, well, why do I think that change is so difficult? Why do I think it is such an impossibility for me and for other people? Most of us don't take the time to do that, right? And so you mentioned having a coach. I have a coach. Coaching really kind of put all of these thoughts on their head for me. And it's because on our own, it's really challenging to answer these questions. And honestly, if I had asked myself these questions, I just would have said, I don't know, and moved on, and never really encouraged myself from curiosity to move forward and look for an answer of why I think that change was not possible for myself.
You use the word fixed mindset. Can you tell me a bit more? What do you mean by fixed mindset?
Yeah, fixed mindset just kind of is the belief that, again, things are the way that they are, that again, the capacity for change is not there, that there's not something else, something greater, something different available to us, believing that our current level of knowledge is all the knowledge and not looking beyond it, assuming that our current beliefs are the only beliefs that we could ever have, and not really taking an opportunity to question them or look to see maybe there's more.
And as you say that, I'm thinking, well, yeah, that sounds obvious. Of course, there are different ways of thinking. Of course, there are different beliefs. Of course, change is possible, and people change all the time. We change all the time. So part of me thinks that, but then another part of me thinks, but I guess that when we're in the middle of that, we probably don't see it because, the rational, as we're talking about it now, I say, yes, of course, change is possible and people do it all the time. But then I'm guessing sort of when you and I or somebody else is in the middle of it and people think, okay, whether I need to change my work or life balance or my relationship with work, careers, whatever it might be, when you're in the middle of that, you probably don't see that. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, 100%, right? So there is comfort in remaining who we are. And one of the things that I coach physicians on all the time is that complacency does not get you what you want, right? We can stay in our current life the way that it is because it's comfortable. Getting something different, getting the things that we want, growing and changing takes effort, and it's uncomfortable because if you already knew how to do those things, you'd already be doing them. And so in order to get that growth and that change, you have to be willing to experience the discomfort of learning how to do things differently. And one of the important reminders I like to give the physicians that I work with is that your current life is not without discomfort, right? So people believe that the complacency, the comfort, right, that's the reason to not change. But it has this false attitude that like my current life is totally comfortable. And the truth is, right, there is a lot about our current lives for every single one of us where discomfort exists. And it's really just a matter of choosing, do I prefer the discomfort that I currently have in my life or the discomfort of change that gets me where I want to be?
So people, it almost sounds like we self-delude ourselves and say, well, this is what I have, this is all I'm capable of, this is my life, and and nothing else is possible. And the reality is that actually change is hard work, and it kind of in some ways that there's a payoff to not doing anything. But equally, but the payoff, we think, okay, it's fine, but it really isn't fine. So this kind of feels like there's like multiple levels of self-deception in there, I think.
100%. There's this underlying belief that this is as good as it gets. There's also this underlying belief that I've already achieved so much in my life, I can't ask for more. And so a lot of physicians are out there and they are trying to figure out like, I don't even know what I like anymore. And do I even have the right to ask? Right? I've committed myself to this path. I should just be happy with what I have. I've already achieved so much. Why should I be asking for more? And at the same time, feeling kind of a lack of fulfillment and a desire to do and achieve other things, but believing that it's not available to them. It's challenging for sure.
So where does this idea that there's all kinds of beliefs here that actually, as we're discussing them, I mean, they're laughable, aren't they? This is as good as it gets. I mean, it's a ridiculous thing, isn't it? As we're discussing it now without any emotions on a podcast, but I'm sure that, when I'm in the middle of that, I can't say, no, it's not laughable at all. It's fact, yeah? But so, okay, so we've got this thing, well, it's as good as it gets, or I've achieved everything I can, I have everything I can, I can't ask for more. How do those beliefs develop? Where does that come from?
Yeah, so I think it starts by asking ourselves, what is a belief? And, beliefs really are just thoughts that we've had over and over and over again. And we've thought these things so many times that they just become ingrained. And we stop questioning, is it even true? Right? We just all of a sudden just take it at face value. And, I guess the question is, where do these thoughts come from? How do they get integrated into our belief system? And that's difficult to say. I think that's different for all of us. And I think it's important to note that taking the time to dig into this, to look at these beliefs and the thoughts and kind of the things that are going on underneath is one of the first things that is required to change. Because if you have a fundamental belief that you can't change, then the first thing that needs to happen is you need to change that belief. Otherwise, you're never going to move forward and get to the point where you do.
I hope you're enjoying the show. Please click subscribe so you'll be notified when new episodes become available. This podcast is part of my mission to help doctors create successful and meaningful careers. You can be part of that mission too by forwarding this show to one person who you think might benefit from listening. Thank you. Now on with the show. It's interesting for me thinking one of my beliefs that's problematic that I've discovered is whenever I talk about work, I sort of say, well, I've got 7 days to work. Yeah, and sort of, and you know, and you're laughing, and that kind of just that came out in one of my discussions, actually sort of with my coach, and said, right, you got 7 days to work. So, and I kind of thought, okay, so my brain thinks there's 7 days to work. And sort of, and how long is you working there? Well, you know, I don't know, I've got 16 hours that I can work. Right, okay, so 16 hours, it's just this sort of, it's interesting, these patterns. And I'm guessing that lots and lots of people will struggle with doing work in the evenings and doing work at weekends, and, you know, and sometimes for good reasons and sometimes not particularly for good reasons. And the problem is that we perhaps just assume that I think we assume that it's normal. We assume that everybody works evenings at weekends and that we have to do that. And I guess if you've thought about it and it says, I'm doing it and these are the reasons why, I've analyzed it, I've considered it, these are the reasons, that's fine. But probably a lot of the time we do it and we haven't really thought or analyzed and considered, because we just go on autopilot all the time.
Yeah. And I think that has, I mean, you're alluding to the power of coaching, and I agree with you, because the things that I have been asked by my physician coaches are things that I never asked myself. I never even considered them. And one of the things that I love, I've heard said about coaching is, you can't read the label from inside the jar. Right. And so, you know, it's so, a lot of these things, you know, sometimes the physicians I'm working with will say like, oh, well, you know, this is so obvious. Like you were just saying, right? When you're having this intellectual conversation about it, like, of course.
Yeah.
And we're so stuck in the way that we choose to think about things that we can't see it for ourselves.
Can you give me sort of some examples, not naming any names, but I'm interested in what kind of, when it comes to change, what kind of things people come with, and what kind of underlying beliefs people have that needs to change in order for change to happen. Can you give me some examples?
Sure. Well, a big one is around time. The belief I don't have the time to do, just for, you know, general purposes, like I don't have time to do any of the things that I enjoy, right? And so again, a lot of times it takes examining, well, how are you using your time, and why do you think there's no time, and helping people to align the things that they want to be doing versus the things that they are actually doing. Money is another big one, right? So time and money, these are two of the biggest things that we speak about, we talk about, believing that we don't have the money to do the things that we want to do. I think those are two of the big ones that I chat about.
I'm interested in this idea. So you said there are this, if you think with time, the stuff that I'm doing, or the stuff that I am doing, the stuff that I think I ought to be doing, and the stuff that I want to be doing. And can you tell me a bit about the difference between those things?
Yeah. So, you know, if you are not intentional about how you spend your day, things will take up your time. Right. And so there's always going to be something that fills the space. So if you're familiar with Parkinson's law, things will take as much time as you give them. And if you give things too much time, other things will creep in to fill the time, and something will fill the time in the space.
Okay.
And most of us do not spend any significant time being intentional. Are we focused on important tasks? Are we focused on urgent tasks? How do we decide what is getting done when? And a lot of times the things that are important to us fall by the wayside as we deal with urgent issue after urgent issue. And so there may seem like there's not enough time to do the important things that you want to be doing, like exercise, like going to sleep on time, you know, all meditation, all of the things that are important, good nutrition. We know these things are important, And if we're constantly dealing with the urgent things that just pop up, the phone call, the email message, somebody telling you something needs to be done, then you're right. You're not going to have time for the things that you want to be doing.
But as I'm listening, I'm thinking, you describing me really, which is that I seem to work extraordinarily long hours. And the more I work, the more work there is, and there's always stuff. And I think for the most part, I mean, I'm very lucky that most of the stuff that I do is interesting, and I enjoy doing most of the things. But I have zero time for anything because all the time there's all this stuff that needs to be done, and it's all interesting and it's all important. And it is, I'm lucky that it's all stuff that I enjoy, but it kind of just expands and expands and expands. I guess sort of if I'm kind of thinking in terms of my insight would be, I don't plan the day because because work arrives and it gets done. It more arrives and gets done, more arrives, and the quicker that I turn it around, the quicker it keeps arriving, because then God forbid people get to know that Matt answers his emails really quickly. So instead of emailing any one of the other 20 people they could have emailed to get the answer, well, they're going to get it. 2 weeks later they email me because they know they're going to get an answer, usually within half an hour, if not within 10 hours. Yeah. But I guess so what you're saying there is the challenge is that I don't have a plan as for what I'm doing, because I'm just turning up. I do the work that needs to be done and that's it. But what you're suggesting is that it's better to have a this idea of intentional. Can you tell me a bit more about being intentional? So how can I be more intentional with what I spend my time doing?
Yeah, I think it starts by identifying what are the things that you actually want to be doing. If you know that you want to be in bed at 10 p.m. every night, what do you need to do to get into bed at 10 p.m.? When do you need to stop doing your work so that you can calm down and start the process of getting ready for bed so that you are in bed at 10 p.m. And it does require and maybe for somebody else that's not important. But so you need to first look into what are the things that you want to be doing? How do you want to be incorporating them into your life? Exercise. This comes up all the time with exercise. So if you want to be exercising, when are you going to do it? So first finding, okay, when do I want to do it? I don't like working out in the morning. I want to work out in the afternoon. Okay, well, how do I make that happen? Because if you haven't figured that stuff out, like what are the things you actually want to be doing? So many of us speak in these general terms like, oh, I just want to do more things for myself. Well, what does that even mean? So what are the things? And then actually working backwards and committing to your schedule like you were if it was somebody else on your schedule. Because that's the other thing, is that so many times we are so readily available to everyone else in our life. We're always going to show up for them. If you put something on my calendar, I am going to be there. And if we put something for ourselves on our calendar, we see it as more flexible, right? We see it as like, oh, I can let something else take this spot.
Yeah.
And so how can you commit to yourself like you commit to other people?
And that's a really big challenge for me in many aspects, because again, if somebody says, oh, can I just can I have an hour of your time for whatever, and yeah, sort of no problem. And I'm thinking, well, it was Sunday morning, and Sunday morning, I was going to clean the pond and take the dogs out, but they need an hour of my time, and next thing I know, there's an hour of stuff that's appeared in my diary that isn't what I wanted to do. I mean, why? I mean, I find it much easier to say yes to other people than I do to myself. So what can I do about that?
Yeah. The answer to that is it takes time. So this is, I like to talk about this because I think this is really important. Let's say you make plans with a friend to go out for lunch, and you get to the restaurant and you're sitting at the table, and your friend texts you and says, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm not going to be able to make it. Can we reschedule? And you might say like, oh, that's completely understandable. I understand. And you'll go about your day, and you reschedule and you show up to the restaurant for lunch, and your friend texts you, you're already sitting there, you're ready to order. And your friend says, oh, sorry, I'm not going to make it again. And you probably be a little bit more irritated than you were the first time. but your friend wants to reschedule and you begrudgingly reschedule, and then you show up a third time and the same thing happens again. Well, you've now created evidence that this friend is not showing up for you in the way that you had hoped. And so you're probably at some point going to stop making plans with that friend. And in the scenario that you and I are discussing, we are that friend. We are the person who is consistently not showing up for ourselves. And so at a certain point, you just stop trying. And
That,
so the answer
that's
to
me,
your
Michael.
question, say
That's
that
me,
again, sorry.
Michael. That's me, Michael. I said, "Why, I won't even bother trying to go on holiday because I never managed to go. What's the point in planning a holiday? I've not managed one yet, so I've not managed to have a weekend off yet. So like, there's no point in even trying because it won't happen. So
Exactly, right? And so what is the key, right? Like how do you change that? How do you do things differently? The answer is you start creating evidence for yourself that you can show up in the way for yourself that you want to. So putting something on your calendar and then showing up for yourself when you say you're going to. In your example, like maybe you're not planning a vacation, but maybe you're planning a night out at a museum and you commit to it and you show up and you do it and you create evidence for yourself that you can do this and you can put something on your calendar for you and actually not allow something else to, infringe on that time.
but I know what's going to happen is I'm going to say, oh, somebody's going to phone and say, okay, what's in the calendar? Oh, it's, it's sort of, it's, I don't know, sit in the garden or have a French lesson or whatever. And then somebody's going to say, oh, I need your time. And there's always sort of always kind of, so it's just much easier to say yes to other people than it is to myself. And I don't know, maybe that's just me, Michael, or I have a feeling there's an awful lot of us that struggle like that.
Well, sure. And actually, this is right where our conversation started, right? So you can look at the discomfort of when somebody calls you and wants to take your time when you are, supposed to be showing up for your French lesson, the discomfort in telling them, no, I have something at that time, but well, let's find another time. Or you can deal with the discomfort of your current life, which is not making the time and space for the things that you want and enjoy. So again, it's that, right? So you see how sneaky these things are. We don't even see how these themes creep up into different aspects of our life. So where do you want the discomfort? And the answer is every time you say yes to somebody else, you're saying no to you. So how do you start saying yes to you?
And if we kind of go back to that beginning, to the payoffs and the hidden agenda, I guess the hidden agenda is that people says, oh, Matt's reliable. If you can always call on Matt, he's always going to do stuff. And I have a reputation to maintain. If you ask Matt to do stuff, it'll happen. Yeah, it'll be done in 5 minutes. Yeah, sort of. And if you need him, he'll always be there for you. So I guess the discomfort for me then is maybe that I have a vision of myself as the person who says yes, who's there for other people. I also have a vision of myself as the person who's not there for himself, most certainly. Yeah, but it's competing. But it is a problem for me, as I'm sure for many other people. That next thing you know, you spend 24 hours a day doing stuff for other people, and there's nothing left of yourself, and it's then that kind of pouring from an empty cup, isn't it? Sort of you give, and you never replenish. So it's recognizing where all of this ends, and it ends in burnout, doesn't it? Because you're doing lovely things and you've been very helpful to everybody else, and you've been a super colleague, and you've been a super doctor, and you've been a super friend, because all the time you're available and all the time you deal with everything that you can straight away. But you don't have time for, whether it's exercise, family, movie night, holidays, or going to the museum, or whatever it is, and you don't get any of that recharging time. I think that happens quite a lot. Yeah.
Yes, for sure. Right. And again, it comes back to something else that we were talking about earlier, which is physicians believing like that this is just as good as it gets. Like this is it. And I just have to accept that this is the way that my life is. Or you can try to change and do things differently and try to align more closely with what you want to be accomplishing. It doesn't have to be this way, but it can, right? Some people are happy with how they are doing things. Some people derive an immense amount of fulfillment from doing for others, and that's okay. right? This isn't a judgment about how you spend your time. It's really just a matter of, are you happy with how you spend your time? And if the answer to that question is yes, great, keep going. But if the answer to that question is no, then you start needing to do some of these more introspective exercises about why. Why am I showing up in this way? And so for you, the question might be, what is it about doing things for other people? Like, why are other people more important? Why do they rank higher than you? Right. And I think that that's true for a lot of us, right? This isn't, I'm directing the question in response to what you just said, but I think it's true for a lot of us, is that we do prioritize other people before ourselves. And I think for so many doctors, we lose sight of the fact that by prioritizing ourselves, we're better able to show up for other people. So how can you fill your cup with the goal of being more present for others and being able to do for others?
So what's coming up for me there is that intentionality. It's having thought, okay, now what am I doing? Why am I doing it? Why am I working the way I am? Or why is my life the way that it is? And making some conscious decisions, and that's going to be different for everybody, as you said, isn't it? Yeah. So it's not that one decision is right or wrong or better or worse, but it's instead of, there's all of this work and it's all coming your way, and and I'm run. Sort of instead of all of that, it's thinking, okay, what is it? What's the purpose of this? What am I saying yes to? And I really like that. Whenever I say yes to one thing, I'm saying no to another thing. And in my case, what I'm saying no to inevitably is myself. And you, sooner or later, you run out of juice to give to other people. Yeah. I wonder if I could bring us to a close, Michael, and perhaps could I ask you to summarize, what we talked about? What would be your top tips for physicians, for doctors at work?
Yeah. I think the main thing here is change is possible, and figuring out what it is that you want to change and why you want to change it is going to be crucial in order for you to make it happen. Your why, which we didn't really talk about, but I think it's important to notice, your why is your crutch. Because as you and I have discussed a lot in this discussion, is that there are going to be obstacles that come up along the way. There's going to be a ton of discomfort as you are trying to institute changes. And your why, remembering why you want to make these changes in the first place, becomes a crutch that then you can lean on every time you're like, oh, this feels too difficult, too hard, too uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. You get to recall your why so that you keep moving forward towards the change, towards the goals that you have set for yourself. And then I think some of the self-inquiry, some of the introspection, some of this looking into, well, why do I do things the way that I do? Is really, it can be super transformative, even if you don't make any changes, just in terms of understanding why you are the way that you are. And I know for me, that has been super helpful in my journey as well. And then living life deliberately, finding ways to show up in a way that best aligns with how you want to be living, right? I think that these are some of the biggest things that we can do that will provide the greatest benefit and the biggest changes.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me. It's been super fun.